Welcome to Living the Spiral. This is a place to slow down, take a breath, and listen to the rhythms moving through your life. Here we explore astrology, human design, the I Ching, and elemental ancestral wheels of the year from cultures around the world. These are old maps and living languages that help us sense where we are in time, what is asking to unfold, and how we belong to something far larger than any single moment. In each episode, we trace patterns in the sky and in the body. We weave myth with lived experience, intuition with practice, and the personal with the collective. Living the Spiral is about learning how to move with change instead of pushing against it. About meeting transitions with curiosity, integrating polarities, and remembering that every season carries its own powerful wisdom. When you begin to listen to the cycles, life starts to feel more connected, more meaningful, and more alive. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is Living the Spiral podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Living the Spiral. I'm Alison, and this is the podcast where I track the sky as a living map. I weave astrology and human design and the wheel of the year into something embodied that we can all feel, hopefully. That's the hope. Thank you so much for being here. This episode, we're going into the new moon in Taurus, which is happening in Gate 8, the gate of contribution in human design. And this is one of the more layered and potent lunations that I've tracked in a while. They're all pretty potent, let's be real, lately it seems, but this one is pretty wild. We have a supermoon conjunct Mercury, and it's sitting right on the fixed star Algol, which is known as the Medusa Star. And this new moon is also conjunct Ceres, which is the asteroid of nourishment and what we tend and what feeds us. Mars, the planet of assertion and drive, is moving into exact conjunction with Chiron, the wounded healer, in Aries. And so that's going to happen on the same day as the new moon. And the whole sky is really loaded with kind of the same question from different angles. It's about what we've been gathering, what we've been distilling, and how we're going to offer it to the world with our authentic voice, our style, with our exquisiteness. And so sometimes the world feels like it is asking certain kinds of power to make itself smaller, but this is the new moon to rise into our authentic voice and our authentic power. I'm coming to this recording right after watching a video, an Instagram reel that my friend Meg showed me, and I am wanting to rethink kind of the word contribution. The gate of contribution is where this moon and Algol and Ceres and the sun and Mercury are all standing for this new moon. So there's a lot of activation in this particular gate. And sometimes when I think of the word contribution as a Taurus season gate, I think about a couple of oxen. When I've done visuals for this gate before as a Taurus season representative, I've found images of bulls for Taurus, and I found the oxen that are pulling the yoke, that contributing to human society through their help plowing the fields and that kind of thing. And so that's how I've represented contribution in the past as something that just came to me. But I wanted to think about that a little deeper as we have so many planets in this gate, because contribution, the word, is generally associated with productivity. And I think that this moon is really asking us to blow the definition of contribution wide open and move beyond that narrow-minded or capitalistic representation of what contribution actually means. We're working with Medusa, we're working with Chiron, we're working with Ceres, who's also known as Demeter, the mother energy, the nurturing mother energy. And we're working with a lot of these archetypes that don't lend towards this patriarchal capitalist version of what contribution means. So I definitely want to talk about that in a larger context. And before we dive into that, I just wanted to let you all know that I'm grateful for you being here. I've been doing this podcast for a long time, but have felt a lot more feedback lately and just energy coming in. So I just really wanted to take a moment to share my appreciation for those of you who have been listening, longtime supporters, and those of you that are new here. It's a labor of love, and I'm really excited to be continuing to bring it to you as a contribution in some way to the world that's truly coming from my heart. I told a friend on the phone the other day that the podcast has replaced therapy for me because I'm a self-projected projector and I do learn a lot from talking myself. I hear what I say and I listen to that and it rings true. It gives me some insights. So it is helpful for me, but it's really nice to know that it's landing. So if you would be so kind as to follow, subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever it is that you're listening, really helps me expand my reach and helps me continue to be able to devote resources and time to this project of tracking the wheel and really feeling it in our bodies. One other quick announcement is that I have decided to move my Heart is a Compass course that I was launching in mid-May, which is a course that's mapping the 8 gates of the Wheel of the Year to the 8 gates of the G Center or Heart Center in human design. And I'm really excited to offer this. I'm writing a book about it right now. It's been something that has just come through me this year, and I'm really excited about it. But I thought I would shift it to the fall just to give it the attention that it needs to flesh it out during the summer, and also just feeling like the energy of descent and return feels more at home in the fall. A huge component of the course is about Inanna's descent and how that relates to the Wheel of the Year and the Heart Center gates. And it's a beautiful synthesis. It's been a really fun project to bring together, but I am excited to offer that with a little bit more bandwidth in the fall. So to those of you who signed up and supported this burgeoning framework while it's still finding its shape, thank you so much. It means more than I know how to say that I have you out there supporting what I do. And I'll have more details on when that course is going to launch in the fall. You can find the waitlist form at hearthandspiral.com on my website. So get on the waitlist if you're interested. I think it'll be a really good time in the fall and gives the summer to kick our feet up and address whatever transits come our way. So anyway, let's move on to the new moon in Taurus. This new moon is happening at about 2 p.m. Let's see the exact time. 1:01 p.m. Pacific, so 2:01 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Saturday, May 16th. And I want to, before we dive into the energy of the moon itself, I want to start a couple weeks ago with the energy of where the sun has been transiting, because I really am feeling the path through the transits lately in a really big way since Beltane. And I wanted to just talk about how we're arriving at this new moon. So a couple of weeks ago, the sun was halfway through Taurus in gate 2, which is known as receptivity. And this is the gate of Beltane or Bealtaine, which is the Celtic holy day that falls between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And it's the season of the flower fully opening itself without protection or strategy, just being available to the world, to receptivity of what is going to happen in the world at large. It is the earth over earth gate. And so it's all about being connected to what's going on in our larger environments and getting out of that aggressive early spring Martian energy of just pushing forward and sprouting up. It's more about that opening outward and blossoming. And gate 2 is the most yin gate in the whole system of the 64 gates. And it sits at the G center in the body graph. And it's all about being available for what wants to move through you. And at Beltane, that is what the earth is doing in the northern hemisphere, is opening and blossoming and welcoming the pollinators and the changes and the fertilization that is going to happen in the summer. It's about saying yes, weaving that maypole, fertility, interconnecting male and female, masculine and feminine principles. And so that was Beltane. And I held a ritual that I'm doing for every one of these 8 holy days of the Wheel of the Year for paid subscribers here on Substack. They're 2-hour rituals that involve embodiment and creativity and welcoming the season at hand. And so we did a voice practice during that ritual, opening up our throats and our voices and connecting our energy centers in our body through that vibrational energy. So That was super fun. Thank you to those of you who made it to that. And get on the list for the next one that'll be for the summer solstice, if you're not already. But that was Beltane. It was a time of opening, being receptive. And then the sun moved into gate 23, which is known as the gate of assimilation or distillation. And as I record this on Wednesday the 13th, the sun is still there and will be in gate 23 until the new moon, essentially on Saturday. So assimilation coming after receptivity is really interesting because it's in my mind how the flower's essence gets distilled after being fully open. This fullness of receptivity of the world in gate 23 concentrates into something that can move and be offered. This is like where the bee comes in for the pollen, and it's the distillate that is taken by the bee or the hummingbird moth or whatever pollinator that the flower opened to reveal. You have this radiance becoming a single drop and excess falling away. And when the sun entered gate 23 out of gate 2, I definitely felt something shift in my body where the noise and overwhelm of the previous weeks really started to settle. And I just had a lot more clarity on putting the blinders on as far as what needed to be peeled away and what needed to stay. I've been thinking a lot about flower essences and just watching a lot of videos about herbalism and hydrosols and essences and knowing that there is full blooms and there's the fullness of a flower and then there's also this essence that's underneath. So I think of 23 as the essence. I'm doing this Mandala 64 walk on my Substack. So if you're listening somewhere else and not on Substack, you can find at livingthespiral.com. I'm walking through each one of the gates that the sun travels through as the year goes by, and also have some guest writers that are sharing their insights about certain gates as well. And so for gate 23, I had that same friend Meg who I spoke about earlier, and she shared about her experience with her personality Earth being in gate 23. So check that out. It was a great article that she wrote, really sharing a lot of personal insights about this theme of distillation, where things become obvious in a way that they haven't before through a process of insight, of something just coming through. And the reason I'm tracing the 2 to the 23 to the 8, these are the 3 Taurus gates in a row, is because I really feel like genuine contribution actually works through thinking about what comes before. It's this notion that we can't pour from an empty cup. And so ideally in the weeks before this new moon and before the sun enters this gate of contribution, we allowed ourselves to be fully open and receptive during the season of May Day, and then allowed that to be concentrated into what really wants to be offered and how do we really want to contribute in the world. And so if you miss that flow, if that wasn't something that feels resonant to your life naturally, that's definitely something to think about as we go into this new moon. So that process of being open to the environment and then also coming into an insight about how you are personally distilling everything that is into what is feeling really alive and special for you. So gate 2 to gate 23 to gate 8 is this whole arc of the blossoming flower to the distilled essence and the pollen that is revealed within the flower's petals. And then that genuine offering back to the hive that is what the bees and butterflies have gathered in their pollination. And now they're bringing back something very specific. They're not bringing the whole flower back to the hive. They're bringing back the essence of what is true and what is pure that wants to come through. So now the sun and moon are meeting together in gate 8 on Saturday, the 16th. And I'm going to talk about the Sabian symbol for this. It's at 26 degrees Taurus where the sun and moon are meeting. And the Sabian symbol is a symbol that I don't always talk about, but that I enjoy every so often to look at as the gates. I consider like a micro season of the zodiac, and I consider the Sabian symbols a micro season of the gates. It is a symbol for a very particular degree of the zodiac. So for 26 degrees where this new moon is landing, the symbol is a Spaniard serenading his señorita. And I really like that image because I love classical Spanish guitar, number one. But I also love it because it's not about strategy and it's not about productivity. It's landing in this gate of contribution as a heartfelt offering to the señorita and to the world at large. The music travels beyond the singular person, and the contribution is for everyone that is hearing it. And so the Spaniard here who is singing and serenading, singing his heart out, is fully committed to this offering without even knowing if the window where the señorita sits will open up or stay shut, if he might be ignored or laughed at. But he's continuing to sing anyway because the song is what's inside him and he can't hold it back anymore. It's this natural, organic contribution of what that one song that wants to come out of you, that one note that wants to rise from your heart into your throat. And that's gate 8. That's really how I see this gate of the new moon. It's about contribution that's not being micromanaged into acceptability or productivity, but more about what is rising out of our hearts in an essential form that is not just being receptive, but it's taking everything that we're by osmosis receiving from the earth and bringing it into our essence. So in the I Ching, hexagram 8 is known as holding together. And I think that's a beautiful image too, just to sit with that. The 2 trigrams that make up the hexagram are water over earth. And basically the image that evokes for me is tributaries and streams from lots of different hillsides and mountaintops that are gathering into a single lake. So water over earth being a water that is held by the earth, but that it's coming from lots of different places and becoming the essence of coherence around a center. In the Gene Keys, gate 8, this new moon's gate, has a few different frequencies, as it always does in the Gene Keys. The shadow here is mediocrity. And mediocrity in this sense of contribution is really about the specific way that we make ourselves acceptable, where we sand down the edges and trim off the fat, because we are in a process of trimming from that open flower into the essence. But I think mediocrity would be when we've trimmed down the parts that are stylish and the parts that are interesting or weird or heretical or different or just very you, and trimming those down because we have to decide what we're contributing and just going on the safe path and knowing that maybe when we've shown up fully as our vibrant selves, it has cost us. And so there can be a tendency with this full moon to feel a certain overwhelm of, I don't know what I want to contribute. And then we start to sand off the juicy parts, which sounds painful. I don't want to do that. So I would prefer to keep the juicy parts and sand down the sharp edges, right? And I think I like that better, distillation into contribution rather than sanding down. That's a good contrast, because sanding down, you're chopping something off that creates the form, but distillation is just letting what is inessential evaporate and having the essence of the thing remain. So there's a little bit of a different energy in that. And so since we're talking about contribution in this depth of a way, I do want to talk about the charge around the word contribution that has come to me today. I feel like contribution, even if we're talking about it being this serenade or this song coming from the heart, you hear the word contribution and it's this productivity coded word that's all about output and achievement and the thing that you made or you built or you completed that you can point at and put a gold star on and measure and feel successful about in our society. And it's like, how are you contributing? And I really think this is interesting in light of a video that I just watched that was about research into the female nervous system. And the video is by a relationship and intimacy and embodiment coach named Sarah Intrup on Instagram. And she was talking in this video about how women's bodies, the female nervous system, had not really been researched or studied in a scientific way until the early 2000s, which is crazy. And before that, the nervous system studies were all built on male bodies. So our whole understanding of stress and regulation were done on men. And when researchers finally started studying female nervous systems, specifically in the 2000s and beyond, what they've found over the course of these couple of decades is that women regulate their nervous systems and find wholeness and love and happiness through the chemical oxytocin, not dopamine. And so men tend to feel grounded and whole and settled through the dopamine effects that are put into our bodies through succeeding and accomplishment, that kind of dopamine hit of getting something or winning something or creating something. And it's been studied that women generally regulate through touch and through relating and through genuine connection and presence with other people, is oxytocin. And the part that really called to me to include it in this episode was that excess dopamine in the female body, according to these studies, really depletes oxytocin. So it means that the harder you push and the more that you chase this productivity metric and try to contribute to the world in that specific way, the more you deplete the very neurochemical that makes you feel love and connection and feel whole like yourself. So she mentioned, the harder I try, the worse I feel, is a spiral that many of us have found ourselves in. And so this research, all backed by science, it shows that it's not a personal failing. It's actually the physiology of the female nervous system to run on oxytocin rather than dopamine and to find connection. And so when we run on fuel that we're not built for, and I'm sure there's nuance here with gender, but generally it does feel like emphasizing oxytocin rather than dopamine for female-bodied people feels like counterintuitive to what our society wants of us, but also so important to avoid burnout and to avoid that depletion that we feel. She mentioned that we feel oftentimes a lot of shame when we shift from the dopamine system to the oxytocin system, because this over culture of the society is based on producing enough. And when we need more rest or need to focus on tending a relationship or tending to a child or nurturing instead of closing a deal, that shame can really percolate through our bodies because the system we live in is all about measuring a certain type of contribution. And there is so much relational labor, emotional tending, work that's about staying in contact with the people around us. And that is a massive contribution. That is the most important contribution to society. But the world of up into the right kind of capitalist infrastructure is reaching the end of its rope. It's fraying, right? Because if we can only think of contribution in that way, it is depleting at least half of the population in a neurochemical way. Because I really want to flip the script about how we think about contribution, especially as it relates to this new moon, because the shadows of mediocrity can really creep in. And on this new moon, we have such an opportunity to plant seeds for what it is that we want to contribute and to build. But in Taurus, it's relational, it's sensual, it's embodied, right? It's not about the charging forward. It's sitting and enjoying and tending. That is a massive point of contribution in this world. So in the Gene Keys, the gift of Gate 8 is style. And I really think about style not as a superficial thing, although I did go to the thrift store yesterday with my daughter and she picked out this really cool flame red dress that I feel very stylish as I record this. It's not about that, right? It's about this specific way that you move through the world that really includes how you nourish and how you connect and how you tend to the people in your life, how you contribute in that way, in the Taurian type of way. I think of just these mama bulls, mama cows tending to their children. You always see the archetype of Taurus with its offspring, with its children nearby. And it's a very sweet image that I have in my mind of that. So wanting to call that to attention rather than the oxen that are tilling the fields. It's more of that contribution of motherly love, right? And fatherly love and parental type of unconditional love here. It's all about just, sending a text to someone if you're thinking about them, or picking up the actual phone and making a call, making a meal, listening in a way that's not trying to fix something. And all of those are like these different streams that are finding their way into the lake of water over earth. And the city of this gate in the Gene Keys is exquisiteness. And I love this word. It means pressed out and as if from a flower, the most essential thing that can be offered whole. So it's the style of the essence. So that's a really interesting thing to think about, is this arc between mediocrity to style to exquisiteness as it relates to contribution. So moving on to the aspects, this new moon is conjunct Mercury. And I think this is really interesting because when we think about embodied astrology, in Taurus, Taurus is the sign that rules the throat. It rules the vocal cords. It rules the lower jaw. And so it's about speech and interaction in the world through the throat. And then Mercury also as a planet is the planet of communication and the messenger between worlds. It is a lot about speech as well and communication in that way. And so we have 8 gate as a throat center gate in the human design body graph as well. A lot of the Taurus into Gemini gates are throat center gates, and all of the throat center gates are within this season of late spring into early summer. So this season in general, and this moon in particular, is centered on speaking and using our voices and feeling that vibration in our throats. And so this moon is conjunct Ceres, the asteroid, as well, who is the asteroid of nourishment, of tending, and what feeds us and what we feed. Ceres is known as Demeter in Greek mythology, and is Ceres in Roman mythology, the mother of Persephone. And she is the harvest maiden, essentially. Ceres is about asking not just what you're offering, but what you've been keeping alive yourself, what you've been nourishing and tending to in the darker part of the year, and the things that you kept feeding even when you weren't sure if they would stay alive. It's this devoted nurturance that Ceres brings to the table with this new moon. So we're thinking about contributions, we're thinking about our exquisite style, and we're thinking about how that nurtures, how bringing our full selves, like the serenading serenading the señorita, is bringing that full heartfulness, not trying to prove anything, but really just coming into our own about what is real that wants to come from us. So Ceres conjunct this moon is calling forward this tending that made the song possible, the practice and the care that went into learning the song and choosing the right song for the señorita. So that is a beautiful addition to this new moon. And I feel like it's definitely time to share what has been distilled from the blossoming of Beltane and over the past week in the Gate of Distillation. And so it's time to sing and strum your guitar under the window wherever you are, however that comes forth for you. Then we have another conjunction with this moon. It's conjunct Algol, which is a fixed star known as the Medusa Star. And fixed stars are fixed. They're not the wandering planets. And so Algol is always in this part of the sky. So having the new moon here just brings a little bit of attention to this fixed star. And Algol carries a very fierce reputation in the fixed star tradition. Astrologers throughout traditions have called Algol malefic, a star of violence and calamity, It's when heads will roll kind of energy. It is a star that is at the severed head of Medusa in the constellation Perseus, being the hero who cut the head off of Medusa in myth. And so this definitely, there's a certain heavy energy to this fixed star that can bring down the nurturing, stylish energy of the gate. But I do think it's fascinating to do a retelling of the story of Medusa from a more feminist perspective, because Medusa is not only the evil monster who turns men to stone, although that's part of the story. Medusa was a priestess. She was a gorgeous, stylish, exquisite priestess whose presence was so real. She was so in and of herself, and her power was so true to her essence that she ended up becoming a monster through the lens of the patriarchy. She was demonized and contained and beheaded, and even then, after all of that was done to her, head still held magic and power. And the myth of Medusa is that she was this glorious priestess who was a devotee of Athena. And as a devotee of Athena in the temple of Athena, one had to be a virgin and tend to the higher goddess pursuits. And Medusa, this golden-haired goddess, was raped on the steps of Athena's temple by Poseidon, who had a lust for her. And instead of punishing him, because gods cannot be punished in that way, Medusa was punished by Athena, and Athena turned her into a monster, this snake-headed monster that we all know, who turned men to stone, but just by looking at them. And she was sent off to an island in order to be alone. But instead of that happening again, Athena gave her the power of protection by turning men to stone and not having to deal with the antics of these gods or mortal men as well. And so that is one reading it wasn't a curse, but it was actually a gift that Athena gave to her from woman to woman. But there's definitely a lot of magic within the Medusa story when you start to look a little bit deeper than the fear-based mythology that has risen to the surface. When we hear about the Perseus myth, that she eventually was killed and beheaded by Perseus, the great hero, who then used her powers for his own advantage. But what we don't often hear in this myth is that from her severed neck, from Medusa's severed neck, sprang the Pegasus, the winged horse, who was the poet's horse. And Pegasus was the one who, when his hoof struck the earth on Mount Helicon, opened up the Hippocrene Spring, which are the waters that flowed to inspire poets and artists and singers for generations to come. And the muses drank from that spring, and every poem and song and piece of art that cracked something open and let the light in, all of that lineage runs back to Medusa and the body of Medusa that had this magical uprising of Pegasus and this spring. And so her destruction was also her dispersal. She didn't disappear fully, but she became a source, a wellspring of wisdom, of art, of poetry, of style, of exquisiteness. And so it's so beautiful to have her within this gate, not just to think of, okay, whose heads are going to roll during this new moon. I think there's a lot of that vernacular narrative out there right now. And that's definitely possible. There's definitely some heads that might need to roll. But there's also this deeper layer that once the head is chopped off, there is, in an embodied way, there's beauty that can come from the spring of the body. So very gorgeous. Medusa is, I'm a huge fan of Medusa and this myth. And as a Gorgon, she was a face of the goddess that had a sacred mask that was used in ritual to protect the sanctuary of Athena's temple, and also to mark the threshold between what was profane and what was holy. And once she had the powers to turn men to stone, to petrify with her gaze, we can think of that as well as this gaze of the divine feminine, or of this piercing energy that is available and willing to meet you fully and see through every pretense and every performance. and get down to the essence of what's actually true. So that petrifying gaze can be terrifying, and it was mythologized as monstrous and death-like and terrifying. But when you think of it as coming from a woman who was assaulted and then punished for it and then had to be removed from her own life and sent off to an island as the only way of protection, thinking about that gaze, thinking about that piercing, no nonsense, looking to the heart of what's really going on, that is the type of energy that's rising to the surface here in this new moon. Is no bullshit. Just look straight at the heart of it, get to the essence of it, and bring your style forward from that. Algol, the name of the star, comes from the Arabic Ras al-Ghul, which means the head of the demon. And in Arabic, the word ghul also shares its root with words for returning and coming back and things that cannot be killed or kept down. So that could be scary, right? It could be malefic to know that whatever scares you will keep coming back anyway. And Medusa will come back again and again in another form. And she comes back in the form of female-bodied people standing up for themselves, standing up for what's right, and saying what is actually true and saying what they actually saw. Believe the victims. This is definitely a major narrative that goes far back into our human history, and we need to believe the victims and not make them monsters. So that's a huge thing that could come up collectively during this new moon as well. We're definitely inside a collective Medusa moment, I would say. So worth digging deeper into these myths, especially that one, because the voices that are being silenced right now are not random, and the funding that's being cut from universities and arts organizations and public health and anything that is nurturing or asks people to think critically or feel deeply, that is not random either. What is getting systematically defunded and dismissed is something we really need to take a look at. Look at what's being exiled to the island. Look at what's being made into a monster. And know that's because it's something that to fear, because it looks at the real essence. It's the gaze that sees clearly, and it's a presence that can't be managed. There's a lack of needing permission when you're in a Medusa body. You know that your gaze is going to turn something to stone, and you're going to gaze anyway. You're not going to avert that gaze because it's time for the truth to be told. We have Mercury conjunct this new moon, which is about sharing our voices. We have Ceres, the nurturer. We have Medusa, the petrifying gaze goddess. And it's about truth being revealed. It's about what truths are being swallowed by all of us and by institutions, by communities that have learned that speaking clearly has consequences. And so Taurus being the sign of the throat, the physical instrument of speech, and Mercury being this messenger between worlds, it has a quality of asking what we're holding in our throat and what we've learned to manage down to mediocrity because the cost of saying it felt too high. None of this is abstract. Right now, we are watching people lose their livelihoods for saying things that are true. And we're watching a culture that's actively trying to make certain kinds of seeing and speaking and being into monsters. So Algol conjunct this new moon is really bringing that to our attention and helping us remember that Medusa's power didn't die with her when she was beheaded by the heroic overculture. That's the wisdom of the goddess, of any goddess all around, is that death is part of the cycle and it doesn't end with that, even though some people might try to convince you otherwise. The severed head still sees, and her gaze is still piercing. It can still turn men to stone even after the death. And then the wellspring that sprung from her body and the winged horse. So we have this new moon asking us about whether we are willing to be someone and contribute to the world as someone who keeps seeing clearly and speaking from that seeing, even when it is hard, and especially when it's hard. So Taurus is patient and based in the senses and grounded and builds things that last, stable. So let's think about that. Let's bring that into our attention for this new moon, new beginnings, planting seeds that are sustainable based on our truth and our willingness to not avert our gaze. And the Spaniard serenading his senorita isn't aggressively climbing up the window. He's just standing there and singing with a consistency and devotion and a refusal to be silenced and bringing what's true from his heart up into his throat. So that's really the medicine of this new moon and the medicine of gate 8, the gate of contribution. It is this distilled, exquisite, committed offering of what you actually see and what you know and your experiences. And even in the face of a world that keeps asking you to sand it down into something more acceptable, don't accept the mediocrity. Step into your style this new moon. Now, Chiron and Mars are another element here that we'll dive into. Chiron is meeting up with Mars exactly in Aries, and it's on the same exact day as the moon meets the sun in Taurus and conjuncts Algol. So Mars and Chiron are in gate 3, which is the gate that is the cusp between Aries and Taurus. And it is known as difficulty at the beginning in the I Ching. It is the gate of the seed in the dark before it knows it will become anything. It's the gate of the void and how everything real, all new beginnings come out of a void, a chaotic void that is not necessarily about disorder or chaos, but it's about emptiness from which something springs. But it can feel difficult when you're starting something from scratch. And I think the mythology of Chiron, the wounded healer, being in this gate of new beginnings can have a lot of us feeling like we're not making as much progress as we want to, even towards our personal essential style, even if it's not the myth of progress type of progress that is that productivity. It can still just feel like we are in this void of new beginnings. And there's a wound there because it's like it calls on the times when we tried to start something and it just didn't pick up. It didn't really feel like it was moving fast enough or taking off, right? And so this wound of Chiron, when we look at his myth, is that he was an immortal but took an accidental strike from a poisoned arrow, and he could never heal or also couldn't die from this wound. So Chiron, this centaur, carried an unhealable wound for as long as he lived. And then what he did with that wound was basically to become the greatest teacher in the Greek world. He taught Achilles and he taught Asclepius. And he taught Asclepius, who's the god of medicine himself. And the wound wasn't something that he just ignored. It was the source of the teaching. It was this thing that couldn't be fixed in him that gave him exactly what others needed. He gave him access to reaching that place of the depths of the wound in order to teach and heal other people. So Mars conjunct Chiron is not gentle. Mars is the god of war. Mars wants to move and act and strike. And when he meets up with Chiron, it's almost like the sword of Mars is touching on that wound. And we have to ask what is driving this desire to move, what or old injury is underneath that urgency that we're feeling. So that's something to sit with this new moon, is this Mars conjunct Chiron energy of holding these two things at once, in the gate of difficulty at the beginning, knowing that there is always chaos before order, and there's always a moment where the seed coat is cracking and everything is disoriented and tender and not yet formed. Nothing has sprouted out of that seed yet. It's just in that cracked state. That's where Mars and Chiron are coming together. So there can be a tendency towards impulsivity of wanting to speed things up. And then Chiron is reminding us to move a little slower, know that the crack is where the light gets in, as I've said many times before. But knowing that the reason why we might feel a certain urgency is because of a deeper wound, and that wound could actually be the thing that helps us later on down the line. So when I think about Medusa and Chiron myths both having an active place in this new moon, It's very interesting because they both have wounds that were inflicted by someone else, by a world that couldn't hold their power without distorting it. Medusa wasn't born a monster, and Chiron was not born injured. Both of them were tossed out because they didn't fit in the larger narrative, and looking at them brought awareness to our wounds and to the things that shouldn't happen in this world. And so both of these entities were transformed by violence into something that the culture then used to frighten people away from the wisdom that they held. And as we evolve throughout time, I do feel like we're able to hold Chiron not as something to fear, but as an exalted centaur god who was able to hold that wound and teach, and Medusa as someone who is a wellspring of beauty and art and poetry and style. And so both of them are these sources, even though they suffered tremendously at the hands of the larger culture of unfairness and injustice. And yeah, the waters that sprang from Medusa's severed head and the teachings that came from Chiron's unhealable wound are definitely the same kind of knowledge. It's this knowledge of the depth, knowledge of the dark time, knowledge of the underworld, knowledge of the depths that can only come from having been broken open by something that wasn't your fault and deciding anyway to let it be generative and let yourself bloom from something that you may have been a victim of. I really don't like victimization and victim culture, but there are times when we are truly the victim of something that was not our fault. And so to give ourselves some compassion and empathy, and to give these myths compassion and empathy, knowing that a lot has come and been generated from these myths. So Mars and Chiron coming together in gate 3 at the same day this new moon conjuncts Algol. Just remember that the difficulty at the beginning that you might feel isn't a sign that you've taken a wrong path. And this cracking open feeling is really how anything gets in and how anything gets out. And you just have to consider whether you can let your injury be the teacher rather than an obstacle that you keep coming back to. So we're living in this world that I'm not taking lightly. This new moon brings a lot of institutional wounds to the surface, institutional injustices to the surface. And we have to remember that whatever we're going through, whatever you're going through out there, is not only personal to you. It might feel so personal, but there is a tie-in to the collective experience that we're all having. I've heard a lot lately about paradigm shift, about quantum leaps, about timeline jumps, because it honestly does feel like things have shifted so dramatically from just a few years ago. We have the hantavirus cases being tracked and pandemic language back in circulation. And so even if you're not following the news closely, your nervous system is attuning to what's going on in the collective because we can't not. We're part of a larger infrastructure of the fascia of humanity. We have the UFO disclosure hearings happening that at the high levels of government that might have seemed like science fiction a few years ago. And the economy is certainly strained. We have conflicts rippling through our energy prices and our food prices, and this low-grade financial dread and paranoia that has really become background noise for most people in the world. You're not alone in this. I'm not alone in this. There's this deeper disorientation that's happening where the structures that we used to look to up on high to tell us which direction we should go and where we belong and how things are going to be figured out and solved are definitely unraveling, and nothing has fully replaced them yet. So we're in this difficulty at the beginning time. Chiron and Mars are hitting on that in a big collective way. And it won't end with the transit, but it's a time to pay attention to that and to know that your nervous system isn't overreacting, but it is responding rationally to truly uncertain conditions. And we're all in this together. The wisdom from this moon is to bring what's really real for you up to the surface and what feels like energizing and stylish is for you in that deeper way. So in addition to these kind of geopolitical conditions, I'll zoom out just to give a quick overview as this new moon feels like a very pivotal moment, to zoom out to the outer planets and the nodes and what's happening with them to give a sense of the larger sky that we're operating within. Pluto right now is retrograde in Aquarius in gate 41 for the next 5 months or so. And gate 41 is known as the gate of contraction or pressure, like the contraction that happens before birth begins. It's this decrease that has to occur before something genuinely new can begin. And the shadow of this gate where Pluto is fantasy, where we can escape into what we wish were true rather than staying present to what actually is. So 5 months of Pluto going backwards through this gate is 5 months of kind of excavation and awareness and analysis of this place where we are, this very new beginning in the most fundamental way. We can ask ourselves with Pluto there where we're living in a story that isn't real anymore and what truly needs to be released so that something new can begin. So a lot of new beginning energy in the sky. The nodes just moved. The north and south node also just moved, not into a new sign yet, but into a new gate, the final gate that they'll be in Pisces and Virgo. And the north node moved into gate 55, which is the gate of abundance and spirit and emotional richness. And I was listening earlier this week to Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, who changed the city, the high vibe frequency of this gate from freedom to another word, which is romance. And I really liked listening to this as far as the North Node being like our collective hunger, where we want to be headed, our collective destiny. And romance in this sense is a connection of like full participation in being alive and freedom with the world, not freedom from the world. So I've seen lately a lot of people just really desiring whimsy and fun. It's been an inside joke with a couple friends as far as like whimsy. I just miss the joy and the whimsy, the fun for fun's sake, the freedom within that word whimsy. And so romancing the world is all about our collective desire to go towards this full participation and aliveness rather than being kept down by the powers that be and feeling like we don't have any freedom or any flexibility or movement. I think it's really important to attune to that North Node and romance the world as much as we can as we enter summer, regardless of what's happening on the political stage. The South Node has moved into gate 59, which is the gate of intimacy. And so that's about becoming intimate and dissolving barriers and dissolving boundaries with the world. And so we're releasing that type of intimacy for more of a abundant personal spirit and a certain aliveness and stylishness with being our full selves and not letting ourselves get dulled or muted by giving our power away to anyone else. The collective is really being pulled towards, emotional richness and abundance of spirit and devotion to your own life force. And it definitely is not saying to wait until conditions improve. It's saying to do it now. And the new moon is very much highlighting that as far as how we think about contributions. So those are a couple of changes that have happened lately that have been in the astro news, the Pluto retrograde and the nodes shifting. And we still have Neptune in the gate of innocence in Aries, and Saturn is now in the gate of the hunter, the gate of disciplined pursuit and showing up for what matters with consistency. And that is the outer planetary alignment of the sky right now and what the new moon in gate 8 is landing inside. So it's all about just bringing your fullness of yourself to the picture and knowing that we are in a collective new beginning and that it's not just you. I've been doing this podcast for about 3 years now, writing consistently on Substack for almost 4 years. And it's been a true labor of love, a beautiful process that I've enjoyed. But I've been thinking lately about what I really want to bring through. And I've been looking at my own chart, as I tend to do when I come to questions about this, and noting that my North Node in Gemini, in the gate of the Gatherer, is conjunct Vesta. And Vesta is the asteroid goddess who is the keeper of the sacred flame. The Vestal Virgins in Rome were the women who chose to not marry and not have a family life, but to tend this sacred flame of the city. And Vestal Virgins were whole unto themselves. There's also a lot of sovereignty. They didn't belong to anyone except for the flame. And their entire purpose was tending a fire that was never allowed to go out. Because if the flame went out, everything went cold, and the hearth of the civilization itself went dark. So for me, as I think about my North Node, my personal North Node, and being close to Vesta, this idea of devotion, I've been thinking about devotion and thinking about how I call myself a disciple of cycles, thinking about how disciple is related to the word discipline. If you're disciplined, it means you're a disciple of something with seriousness and devotion. And so it's all about tending something. For me, I really feel like I'm being called to tending to something and continuing to return to a practice, even when the conditions aren't perfect. And just to keep on showing up every day to the fire, even when you don't see if it is nourishing anybody else. And so as I continue to do this work with the Wheel of the Year and the lunar cycles and the planetary transits and the human design gates where the sun moves through, I really look at these as an act of devotion and staying in relationship with time instead of being dragged through it or tossed about by it. So when I experienced the transit of Gate 23, the distillation transit this last week, I really felt a lot of falling away of what didn't matter as much and really started to understand what I wanted to be bringing to this new moon and what my song is to be serenading under the window. For 7 years, I've really been working as a disciple through all of these practices of the cycles of time, the astrology, the human design, the cycles of breath, with the breath work that I do. And so I'm excited to be bringing something to the table. I have some new reading offerings that I'm bringing to the table that feel like a lot more distilled and a lot more me and a lot more of the moment that I'm going to have available on my site. And I've been really loving doing readings lately, so I would love to look at your chart and explore your possibilities and your nodes with you. If that's something that calls to you, I'll have readings available. And I'm also beginning to offer a coaching package that involves human design and astrology, as well as breathwork, voice work, and creative practice. And it is called Tending Your Flame. It's about the specific ways in which we each must tend our flame as the world demands us to be more shaved down and sanded down and mediocre. I think that as this new moon's energy has come through for me, recognizing that our personal style, our personal offerings, our contributions that are coming from our heart are the most important things to tend to right now. And I personally have been incredibly exhausted by just the collective energy. I have a lot of open centers in my body graph, and I'm picking up on a lot of collective energy. And I think a lot of sensitive people are also picking up on the collective destabilization and getting exhausted by it. And so I'm excited to start offering a coaching package where we can work together to tend your individual flame. A fire in a hearth really needs different things than a fire in a forge, and what keeps one flame alive will drown another. You have a specific flame within you, have a particular quality of light and a particular heat, and the only way to really know what it needs and how to tend to it is to really spend time with it and look at your own inner flame. And that's a lot of what the Heart is a Compass course was about. But I'm actually really excited about diving in one-on-one with people at this point and potentially giving some small group coaching offerings as well. But looking into below the surface as far as the particular way you're built to move through the world and make decisions and come back to yourself when you've gone astray. And all of these are rooted in the breathwork and voice work and somatic practices that I've studied for about a decade now. Because for me, it's never just about getting the qualities in the mind and the words and the labels to describe ourselves, but to actually integrate those into our bodies. So I'll be opening up a small number of spots for one-on-one coaching called Tending Your Flame. Going to be 3-month packages with 6 sessions where you'll get your human design and astrology charts as your map, and breath work and voice work as tools for coming back to your body. And also it'll include voice notes on Telegram or another platform between the sessions so that you don't have to wait for the next call when insight arises from either direction. And so I'm not a therapist, and this isn't therapy, but I am identifying more and more as I tend my own flame as a guide and someone who knows this terrain because I've walked it myself, and these are practices that I've used for myself to come back to my hearth when I'm feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by all the noise. So this offering is something I'm really excited about. It's for people who are experiencing transition and people whose ground has moved, or people who are done waiting for the world to calm down before they come home to themselves. So with all of the collective transits happening, I would love to invite you in if that sounds like something interesting to you. I have a free consultation where we can talk about if this would be a good fit for you. And I also have one-on-one, one-off readings of midlife transits, Saturn return, and nodal, and exploring the nodes through a conscious and unconscious lens. And so there's a lot that I'm excited to bring forth in this week of contribution, on this new moon of contribution, really starting to sing the song that's coming out from my heart. So you'll be hearing more about that as time goes by, but I just wanted to drop that on this new moon. And I really hope you have a beautiful, powerful new moon, attuning to your own exquisiteness, your own style, the things that pour out of you after a wound that are truer than ever before. So during this new moon, I invite you to ask, through the opening of the flower and through the distillation process, through all of that, what do you now have ready to offer to yourself and to the world? So I invite you to take both hands and put them on your chest if you are in a place to do. Just feel the warmth there that's in your heart, behind your sternum. That's your flame, your life force essence that's burning amidst it all. And just taking a few breaths into that warmth, into that heart space, and asking how you can tend to yourself right now, how you can give yourself grace and compassion for any of the injustices that have happened to you or that you're seeing in the world. And welcome in any contribution that is ready to come through, even if it doesn't look like output or productivity, even if no metrics can measure it. But knowing that whatever's coming from that flame in your heart is real. It can be relational, devotional, quietly tended. All of it counts. All of it is the lake filling up from the different tributaries of life that are coming through. So this new moon is all about devotion to your own life force, to your own heart. Thank you for being here and exploring all of these layers with me. And if this episode moved something in you or resonated, please share it with someone who might like it, or leave that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every little share and review helps this work find the people that it belongs with. Happy new moon in Taurus. Please share with me in the comments on Substack or the comments wherever you're listening about how this new moon is showing up for you, and if any of this hit home. I'll see you again for the next full moon episode, but before that I will have another episode coming out of Living the Spiral Magicians, my interview series with magical people, and talking about what they're bringing to the world and what they find important right now. So be sure to tune in for that as well, and wishing you all my love. Have a beautiful rest of your week and a beautiful new moon. Welcome to Living the Spiral. This is a place to slow down, take a breath, and listen to the rhythms moving through your life. Here we explore astrology, human design, the I Ching, and elemental ancestral wheels of the year from cultures around the world. These are old maps and living languages that help us sense where we are in time, what is asking to unfold, and how we belong to something far larger than any single moment. In each episode, we trace patterns in the sky and in the body. We weave myth with lived experience, intuition with practice, and the personal with the collective. Living the Spiral is about learning how to move with change instead of pushing against it. About meeting transitions with curiosity, integrating polarities, and remembering that every season carries its own powerful wisdom. When you begin to listen to the cycles, life starts to feel more connected, more meaningful, and more alive. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is Living the Spiral podcast.